Welcome to Why School is not the Bible study that you want, but it is the Bible study that you need. And look who's back, everybody. It's Adam Block again. That, yeah. It takes practice to get it right.
That does.
Adam's about to have a semi-truck drive through his office, so we'll be all privy to that.
And I'm in my church office, which less than 50 feet that way is a highway. So
we hear the sounds of travel.
Yeah, if you keep bringing me back on here, I might have to get a microphone or something. But right now I'm using a webcam that I think is 10 years old.
It seems to be working, right? Well, Gary, in case you are regular people are like, where's Gary? Is everything okay? Yeah, everything's okay. He just has a infestation of grandchildren at his house. That's my description. That's not what he said. But his kids have got various projects that they're working on, and so they've shuttled the grandchildren to Grandma and Grandpa's house. He ordinarily has a couple of them there every Thursday, but this time there's been I think there's 6 or 7 of them there, and little ones didn't nap, and so he called me and said that he's not sure that he's going to be able to be on tonight because it's a little bit of chaos at his house. And so I sent a frantic note, a desperate note, I think, to Adam. And he has
I'll be that hero.
He has graciously agreed to be that hero.
Not the hero. I only have a couple hours notice. So one of those hours was helping teach a Taekwondo class to little kids.
Mm-hmm.
So last time I had 3 pages of notes. Today I have a half page of notes.
Perfect. Because I also have a half page of notes. And so we should be fine. Not the hero that we deserve, but the hero that we need. So tonight we are in Genesis 33, and this is going to be good. It's good. It seems appropriate that you're going to be able to finish out the meeting of the two brothers.
This motion.
Mm-hmm. It's my Old Testament finishing.
It's a Hebrew thing. Yeah.
It's the Hebrew sign for finish. So I think we're going to use the NLT.
That's what we used last time, right?
Yeah. And this is a fairly short little chapter. We've only got 20 verses. So it's 10 apiece. So let's see. I think you went first last time, didn't you?
I think so. Yes.
I think so. And so it wouldn't really be
people with my use of the good Hebrew for that one word.
Yeah. You want to go first again?
No. I said that's why I went first last time because there's a good Hebrew word in there. I wanted to make sure I said.
Okay. So we don't have that. You don't have that.
There's not a good sound in this one. So
okay. All right. Well, then I'll go first. I'll take the first 10, and then you can wrap up with any, and you put any dialect or inflections that you want on it.
All right.
Genesis 33. When Jacob looked up and saw Esau coming with his 400, then Jacob looked up and saw Esau coming with his 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and his 2 servant wives. He put the servants' wives and their children at the front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. Then Jacob went on ahead. As he approached his brother, he bowed to the ground 7 times before him. Then Esau ran to meet him and embraced him, threw his arms around his neck, and kissed him, and they both wept. Then Esau looked at the children, women and children, and asked, "Who are these people with you?" "These are the children God has graciously given to me, your servant," Jacob replied. Then the servant wives came forward with their children and bowed before him. Next came Leah with her children, and they bowed before him. Finally, Joseph and Rachel came forward and bowed before him. And what were all the flocks and herds I met as I came? Esau asked. Jacob replied, They are a gift, my lord, to ensure your friendship. My brother, I have plenty, Esau answered. Keep what you have for yourself. But Jacob insisted, No. If I have found favor with you, please accept this gift from me. And what a relief to see your friendly smile. It is like seeing the face of God.
Please take this gift I have brought you, for God has been very gracious to me. I have more than enough. And because Jacob insisted, Esau finally accepted the gift. Well, Esau said, let's be going. I will lead the way. But Jacob replied, You can see, my lord, that some of the children are very young, and the flocks and herds have their young too. If they're driven too hard, even for one day, all the animals could die. Please, my lord, go ahead of your servant. We will follow slowly, at a pace that is comfortable for the livestock and the children. I will meet you at Seir. All right, Esau said, but at least let me assign some of my men to guide and protect you. Jacob responded, That's not necessary. It's enough that you've received me warmly, my lord. So Esau turned around and started back to Seir that same day. Jacob, on the other hand, traveled on to Succoth. There he built himself a house and made shelters for his livestock. That is why the place was named Succoth, which means shelters. Later, having traveled all the way from Paddan Aram, Jacob arrived safely at the town of Shechem in the land of Canaan. There he set up camp outside the town. Jacob bought the plot of land where he camped from the family of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of silver. And there he built an altar and named it El Elohe Israel.
El Elohe Israel. See, you got to say some Hebrew-sounding
A
words.
little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I probably did that one wrong. I looked up the other one last week because it was a complicated one.
Well, the secret is just to say it with authority and conviction.
True.
And
That's why I was going to church. And
Yep. All right, let's pray. Lord, we ask that you would guide us and teach us what we are supposed to learn from the scripture tonight. Thank you for your word and for the people gathered today. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. What have you got? I know you only got half a page.
I know.
So
I
you
can't
can
go too
pace
fast
yourself.
this time.
Yeah.
I'll have to be less Ben Shapiro-y.
Oh, I meant to make a Ben Shapiro joke at the beginning, but it's too late now. Okay.
All right, so what do I have? I don't know why we repeated that there's 400 men. I guess it's to build the tension some more. But the tension all breaks in this chapter, though, doesn't it?
Could be. Yeah, it kind of does. But the 400 men was mentioned last time, and apparently, yeah, it might be just a thing to sort of ratchet up the excitement.
Because I think so, because I like to imagine the stories of Genesis as stories that are told around the campfire. Because that's what they are. They're more than stories, obviously, but it's an oral culture who this was a storytelling culture. And so if there were children in the audience who'd never heard this before, they're on the edge of their seats, and you get reminded there's 400 men coming.
Right.
And I think that could be part of it there. And then you learn, hey, he's a nice guy now. He puts himself in front of his families. That said, though, he still puts his favorite wife last.
Right. Just in
so
case.
You get reminded that, oh, yeah, he's got 4 wives.
Right. Just in case. His favorite wife and favorite son. They come last.
They can make it out quickly, I guess.
Yeah. In case there's any funny business with the preceding wives, then Rachel has a chance to skedaddle.
Now, in the 20 minutes of study I did before this, leading up to right before I signed on, because I don't like to go in blind. There's the only other time in ancient culture that we have records of people bowing 7 times is when a vassal is declaring that they are submissive to the king. And so that happens a few times with the Egyptian pharaohs. And so this could be Jacob saying, I am your servant here, which we learn by the end of the chapter, he's not saying that in reality, but he still doesn't know that his brother is going to kiss him yet.
Right.
So he could be saying, I'll be your guy. Don't kill me.
He's coming as in a very subjugated, very inferior posture to his brother. And one of the things that always kind of impresses me, or I just make note of it when I'm reading the Old Testament. And this happens when I'm listening to movies too, where they talk Old Testament, where they call each other Lord. Hey, let me do this for you, my Lord, my Lord. And I know that it's kind of the way we use the term sir. I know that's sort of the way that we use it, but it still seems like there was a general kind of respect that people extended to each other, particularly in this scenario where you've got, well, please accept this gift, my Lord. Please take this. And I don't know that we do that as much in our modern culture as we did before. It seems like we're a little more casual in
We're
our
very casual culture
addressing each other, and it's almost like I'll tell you where I've noticed it the most is I grew up, and it was my parents insisted that anybody who was older than me, anybody who was an adult, was Mr. or Mrs. or Miss, such and such. I didn't address adults by their first name, but somewhere along the line, that has gotten changed to where now.
In my congregation, we've got a couple of families that make their kids call me Pastor Block, and I've said, I don't need that title. It's almost weird to me to be called that because I've grown up with a super casual culture.
Right.
But then I picked up as a kid, because I was in martial arts, and there you have to call everyone sir or ma'am. And so I picked that up a little bit. So that's a little less of the casualness, but.
So you call everybody sir or miss in a martial arts class?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
In the martial arts class, especially if they're higher ranked than you. Nowadays, it's a little more laid back, but like old school martial arts, if you call them by the wrong title, you get push-ups right then and there. So
that's like the military, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't call your commanding officers by their first name. And so, I'm not sure. There was a certain kind of offensiveness that some people had if you said, well, this is Mr. Smith. And then Joe Smith would say, oh, no, it's not Mr. Smith. That's what people call my dad. He just call me Joe. And they would almost like insist on this, don't ascribe Mr. to me, because they wanted that sort of casual,
because our culture definitely fought that, and they fought hard for that. There's some culture wars for that, and so people have pushed back quite a bit. But going to like another culture, I mentioned I was in Zimbabwe back in March. There, I've never been called doctor so much in my life. I've had my doctor now for 2 years, and I've been called doctor maybe 15, 20 times since the first weekend where everybody was excited and called me doctor.
Right.
But in Zimbabwe, I was Dr. Block while I was there. And even other people, not on my behalf, insisted that I was called that sometimes.
Right.
And one guy cracked a joke who was also from America with our casual culture. And then a response from one of the Zimbabweans was, no, he earned that title. We give them their title because that's what respect is.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, and I think there's something to that, right? But it feels weird because we're quick to take away all of the distinctions and titles between people. We like to think of everybody as equal, right?
Which is sort of that's sort of the logical conclusion of a lot of the principles of America, is we should treat each other as equals. It doesn't really work out in practice, but but it's one of the principles, is that we're all equals, which is also based sort of in biblical principles. And so what's the biblical teaching on equalness and yet still having titles? I think Jesus says something about titles too.
Right. But it would depend upon, it depends on, some titles are descriptive, like doctor is a descriptive title. and it signifies that you have attained certain qualifications. You have done certain things to earn that title. And so, granted, there is in this country, there's oh no, I don't want to draw attention to that. I don't want to be placed up here. But I would argue that it isn't necessarily placing a person up above you. It's just acknowledging that this is a person who has achieved a title. Where they've
and I think that plays too into what culture you're in, because in most evangelical Protestant churches, especially like non-denominational stuff, we want that casual atmosphere. We don't want to have the clergy laity distinction, and so we push back from titles. Right. In like a university setting, which is where I was for a lot of the time I was overseas, you want that designation because you're trying to say, hey, this is the expert. And so it kind of does depend on where you're at.
Yeah. And if you have a culture that sort of takes offense to the distinctions that are bestowed upon people for being a doctor, or I think C.S. Lewis wrote about the term gentleman in one of his books, and how it's unfortunate that gentleman used to mean that it was a person who owned property. It was a person who was, possessed land, and that was what a gentleman was. So when you called somebody a gentleman, you were saying this is a person who owns property. It's like a homeowner, basically.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was a big deal back in the day when landowning was a huge deal.
Yeah,
because originally you didn't get to vote if you didn't own land.
Right. And so, but then the distinction, the word changed as words do. Language evolves, and now gentleman is just a thing that you say to somebody as sort of it's like calling them my lord. It's a thing that says, I'm going to pay some sort of formal respect. It's a term of formal respect that you give to somebody, whether or not they've actually earned it, whether or not they own properties. And
well, now gentleman is almost, if you use gentleman, it's almost always sarcastic now, I feel like. Mm-hmm. You're saying someone's not a gentleman. But then for a while it was in a category of, this is what you call someone who is a cut above the rest, which comes back to that landowning thing. And so it became this person is nice to others and actually treats people well because they're not a servant.
Right. Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with acknowledging that, acknowledging somebody by their title. But I do think that it's interesting in the context of, we have a culture now that is starting to insist that we use their pronouns. And so, in our casual culture that doesn't want to put anybody above anybody else, and they don't want to give anybody a title, we've got a growing group of people who are like, no, these are my pronouns and I want you to use my pronouns. It's like, I would rather.
We don't want to put anybody above anyone else, but we want to put ourselves above others.
Right. Right.
And right now in our culture, using unique pronouns is social credit.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can put ourselves above the rest without making it look like we're being arrogant, then we are definitely going to try.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's always the case with special pronouns, but I believe that's sometimes the case.
Well, the special, like what would be a special pronoun? I can't even think of a pronoun that would be.
The ones that didn't exist more than 10 years ago.
Oh, like Z and Zer and okay. So the made up ones
right now. So if you can find a way to make yourself a minority group, then you get social credit. And I'm not going to weigh in on whether or not that's good or bad, because I'll leave that to Lord Branyan.
But it is. Yeah, I'll tackle that. I'll dive headlong into that and suffer whatever consequences. Let's see, they go, no, that's a bridge too far. See, it's already happening.
Well, there's a whole discussion too about whether or not you can call people doctor and sirs and. And no, I would never insist that someone calls me doctor, unless it's during a medical emergency.
Mm-hmm. You can't help it. A medical emergency insists people call you doctor. I will consider you a jerk. Yeah.
So I have one scenario in which I insisted that someone called me doctor, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm allowed to say because the lawsuit's still pending. But it was an educational environment, I'll say that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Marilyn's talking about. I'm going backwards through this conversation. You stood when they came into the room. I'm not sure who
I
that
still
was.
try when I was trying to make sure I stand when I shake someone's hand.
Mm-hmm.
But,
yeah. It's an interesting thing to time. It's always been interesting to me when people talk about Lord, and they use titles for people because it is so far removed from the culture, that I grew up
I
in.
sometimes wonder if we've gotten away from calling people Lord as the proliferation of English translations of the Bible spread. But I'm not sure. That'd be a history I have to look up that I just don't know or not, because of the replacement of God's divine name with the all capitals Lord. And so now it sounds like if you call someone Lord, you're encroaching on God's territory.
Right. We've got overlap now between those terms, and you would need more than 20 minutes of prep time for that, wouldn't you?
I would, and I would have had to have some clue that you're going to spend 15 minutes talking about the one word Lord.
Whoa, I'm a loose cannon. All right, we can move on from that. What else you got?
Let's see. He broke down crying, so we know he's not there to kill him. And then verse 15 shows that maybe the armed guard was there to help protect Jacob, because maybe he heard Jacob's coming home, and I want to protect him because I'm his big brother. And that could have been. And so all the tension was for naught.
Mm-hmm. I think that I've always kind of thought that that's what that verse was, that he was a little apprehensive. Why wouldn't he be? I mean, there were some death threats, I think, earlier, like in the chapter 20 something, 27. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the death threats have dissipated, and now the armed guard was this nice tension in the story, but it really was the opposite. It was supposed to make things smoother. And yet he still runs away in the end. A bunch of that repetition was in chapter 32. There's more repetition in chapter 33. Not as good, though. In 33, we get the reminder that we're still at the place called Peniel, which means face of God. And he tells Esau, you have the face of God. That's an interesting... I don't know what to make of that, but it's there and is part of the repetition of the story. So maybe it's that he's still thinking that he wrestled with God. He's still thinking about that.
Maybe. I would be, I think.
Probably more than a day or two, yeah.
Yeah, I'd think about it for a little while.
So he did wrestle with God. It has changed him in some capacities, but he's still a little deceitful by the end of the chapter. Because I love the no, you go on ahead. We'll be slow. And then he goes in the opposite direction.
Yeah. He said, we're going to meet you at Seir. And then he goes the other direction. And I'm not sure if I'm just not interpreting the language correctly, that if I'm misunderstanding. There's a lot of times where that happens, where the Bible says they did this and this and this, and then we read it. I think we talked about this last time. We read it ourselves and go, wait, that's not at all what happened, but that is what they said. So maybe, if it was me or you, and Jacob said, "Oh, I'm gonna be really slow, so I'll just catch up to you," and then he goes the other direction, and we'd be like, "Wait a second, what are you talking about?" But maybe that's the way Esau understood it. You going ahead, we're going to be slow. And he's like, okay, see you never. Maybe that's just the way that they.
I think part of is maybe there's misunderstandings, but I like to read it from the perspective of he's still, even though he's changed, he went forward in front of his family. He's still a little bit, you got that deceiver in him, because he did just bow down 7 times to his brother, which maybe means that he's placing himself under his brother. But then he wants to get out from under his brother's thumb. And so he goes the opposite direction that way, maybe.
It could be.
that he just said what he needed to say to get the conversation over.
Right.
Which you've all done that at church before.
Of course we have. Of course we have. You have to have an exit line. That was
maybe he should have followed his brother and gotten that armed guard, because the very next chapter we read about an unfortunate incident.
We do.
Where it would have been really handy for his daughter to have been protected.
Yes, that would have prevented an unfortunate incident. Well, I was also kind of pondering the gift, where he's they did a little chit chat. Who are these people? Mm-hmm. Well, these are my children that God has given me. Okay, and they says, here's a gift to ensure your friendship. And Esau says, no, I have plenty. You go ahead and keep that for yourself. But Jacob insists on giving him this gift. And I think from the little bit of research that I did, that in that culture, like accepting a gift was a thing that if a superior did it, then it meant that you had a friendship. And if an enemy did it, it meant that he had that you'd struck a deal, and that he placed himself under you. He was submitting, to you by accepting this gift. And so, gift giving is a thing that I got a friend of mine that he and I fight about this, and we actually have gone to battle about this, not to blows, but we've had some rather intense exchanges about it, because he's a guy who will pay for coffee, for example. Oh, I'll get this, I'll buy coffee, but then he won't let me buy coffee. He never allows any reciprocation. And so one day,
just wants to be in a vassal state underneath him.
That's what I said. I did at one point. I confronted him and I said, "What is going on? How come you won't let me buy coffee?" Well, I just want to buy it. And I go, "But how do you feel when you buy me coffee? I mean, does it make you feel good? Does it make you feel good to buy your friend a cup of coffee?" He goes, "Of course it does." And I said, "Why are you denying me that blessing? Why are you taking that feeling and hoarding it for yourself and not allowing me to also experience the same blessing?" That's another thing in our culture, particularly Christian culture, is that we want to be the ones who give, but we don't want to be the ones who receive. Is that fair?
I think so. I mean, I personally would love receiving gifts, but
okay, why don't you give people your address? If you guys would like to send Adam a gift.
But no, so like if you follow the 5 love languages, 5, right? 5 love languages things. I am fortunate and blessed that neither mine nor my wife's high language is gift giving. And so for Valentine's Day, we don't have to give each other stuff. For birthdays, we don't have to give each other stuff. It's just great.
Okay. That is great. But if you have a person who is a gift giver, and that is what they
usually like
do.
To do gifts too. Usually,
right? But you give a gift to a person, and I made this observation at Christmas time years ago, that if you ever received a gift at Christmas time from somebody that you didn't buy a gift for, like some person that was not on your list, and they go, "Here you go," and they give you a gift, and you're like, "Oh, thanks," but it makes you feel bad, right? It kind of puts you under the pile, which is the opposite effect of what they're trying to have when they give you that gift. So they give you a gift hoping that it will bring you some joy and happiness, and all it does is it makes you feel guilty for not buying them a gift. That's messed up.
That is. The worst, though, is when everybody in your family agrees that these are the members who are getting gifts. Like if you've got extended family members who are going to be at the Christmas party, these are the ones who've agreed to have gifts to, but this other extended family member shows up and your family members have given them a gift, and you didn't because you thought it was agreed. So now you feel like a terrible person at Christmas. That's the worst.
Right.
But, and then you
So
just
everybody except you gives.
give them a gift.
Right. Have you ever taken a gift that was for somebody else and last second handed it off to somebody that you weren't prepared to give a gift to?
I don't know if I can pull that off because we don't buy gift tags. So we actually, in permanent marker, write people's names on the box itself.
I see.
At least on the wrapping paper. I'd have to
You
rewrap
have
it.
to scratch out somebody else's name and write it.
I would have to do that. I could swap grandparents pretty easy, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I just put
Although
grandma.
some of the right last names on there, just so we know which grandparent gets what. But
Do you? Well, you could change that up. Just put boy or girl on there.
well, so my in-laws do a coded system at Christmas. Like for the grandkids, that my in-laws give lots of gifts to their grandkids, and under the trees, all these gifts that don't have anyone's name on them. They've got numbers on them, and sometimes there's symbols. And they've done this ever since my wife was a kid, and she still laughs about the year, and it still happens occasionally where they forget their numbering system, or they misinterpret the chart that they've made, and the wrong gifts are being passed out. It's great.
So it's not a perfect system. It has some flaws. Yeah. Well, I have taken to having like a little basket full of odds and ends gifts that I can
Generic gifts.
whip out. Yeah. Well, here's what I got for you too. And it's like, but it's so dumb. I don't feel good about it. I feel like, yeah, Jeff Lane. Okay, John, you can buy lunch next time. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Jeff comes in to Kokomo on his birthday and buys me lunch.
Now I did that one time in college. I invited all my college friends because I said, "Hey, it's my birthday. I want to have a dinner with you guys." So I invited several friends, and then I paid for the bill, and that was just fun because none of them expected it.
Right.
They all thought we're going to celebrate Adam, and I was like, actually, I'm covering it.
Right.
I'm not bragging too much because I haven't done that in 20 years or whatever. But at the time, like that was just really fun to do.
Right. Right. And that would be, I think, different. And it's my issue. It's not the person giving the gift. It's me. That's what I'm saying. That I have got a messed up.
You're needy.
And it's not that I'm needy. It's just that I need to be in control. I guess that's what it is. I want to be the guy giving the gift. I don't want to be the guy receiving the gift.
Counseling time.
When you give me a gift, then I have to reciprocate so that we're even Steven. I don't want somebody being more generous.
Just do what I do and completely forget the exchanges I had with people before, and so I can't remember who's ahead of me and who's behind. I just don't remember.
See, I wish I had a terrible memory like you, Adam.
I can remember the worst details that don't matter at all, and yeah.
Well, it's a thing. It's a thing. All right.
So lordship and gift giving.
I know.
Weird tangents can we go on?
I didn't expect to get into so many of my personal issues, but we did.
So what you're saying is you want to be a lord so that you can receive gifts.
But then I'll feel terrible about it.
Okay. All right.
Go
we can go to my notes here. So the Ammonites, Moabites, and Edomites are the cousins of the Israelites, right? Or I guess I'll do it this way. So here's the Israel, here's the Jordan River, then you've got Ammonites, Moabites, Edomites. And they're cousins, and they kind of give each other problems sometimes, but not always. And the Edomites are the nation of Esau. The Ammonites and Moabites, they come about through incest, through Lot, right? And there's the Edomites, though, and Edomites actually, it's a really nice introductory story. It's the story of Esau, who forgave his brother and turned out to be a nice guy and wanted to take care of his brother. Mm-hmm. That's not a bad story at all. No. So the Edomites do a good job, and so fast forward to Obadiah. Obadiah is the prophet against the Edomites because they make fun of the Israelites when they get sent off to exile. But the last verse of Obadiah, though, is the Edomites will be included in God's people in the end, which is kind of nice. So
that's very nice.
They get this nice bookend of they start out okay people, even though they start out like humans, but at least they forgive their brother.
Uh-huh.
And then they make fun of their brother in the end, but God still loves them.
Yeah.
So
but that's kind of the story. That's kind of the story for the Jews too, isn't it? The Hebrews. Isn't that kind of their story? Like they're God's people, and they start out and they do okay for a little while, and then they have a bunch of prophets that come along and tell them how awful they are. And
did they do okay for longer than 5 minutes? Like they're humans, and so
right.
but we do get that they're God's special people, and it's I like to point out in this, and this is a tangent too, but God does not pick a people group and say you are special. He picks a guy without any kids and says, I'm going to invent something new in you who will be special. And so he doesn't like pick from among the nations and say, you know what, I'm just gonna pick these guys. They're better than everyone else. He's gonna start fresh. And from the get-go, that starting fresh is, and the purpose of these people will be to bless all of the existing nations.
Right. Right.
And
that
comes up.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point.
I know.
God is sort of like I wish I had something to give you. I wish I had a gift. God is kind of like Disney, in that that's what Disney does. Disney says, hey, we're going to create a band. We're going to create a celebrity, and then they just do. They can literally make anybody into a star.
Money's pretty powerful.
That's what they do. Yeah. And that's kind of what God does. Disney maybe isn't the best parallel to use currently, but
that's
what went through
current events kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's what they do. They just go, okay, we're going to make up a thing, and we're going to turn that thing into a big deal. And then they do. And it literally doesn't matter who you are. And that's what God did with Abraham, right? I mean, he was righteous. He was faithful. We're told. We're not told specifically what he was faithful.
He was faithful in that he trusted God when God says I'm going to do something amazing. Like that's really. He just went okay.
Right, but based on, this was he trusted God. Mm-hmm. He just trusted. So God said, okay, I'm going to make you.
That's the big deal Galatians makes about him. It's that he the only thing he had going for him is that he was willing to say, okay, when God said, I'm going to do something. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem is, he's human too. And so he sometimes thinks he has to help God. And that turns out poorly every time.
Every time it did.
He still tries to go along with what God wants.
Yeah. We talked about this. Gary and I talked about this a few weeks ago, that I think, and I want to float this past you. Gary's, I think, okay with it, but I want Dr. Block to give me this. I think there is that the narrative of Christianity is kind of an evolution of the Christian theology, in that you start with Abraham and you go back into the Old Testament, and the Old Testament Christianity is not even Christianity, but it's a primitive kind of a faith. And you've got guys that are doing things like idols. We got to the thing where when they fled from Laban's place, they stole his household idols, and Rachel was sitting on them and they stole them. And it's like, what's going on here? Why are God's people taking these idols? And I think it's because they were still very primitive in their faith. God hadn't gotten around to telling them yet. He had other things that he was teaching the people. And he hadn't gotten around to saying, oh yeah, this idolatry thing has got to stop. Now he says it later, when he makes a mention of it specifically when he's giving the Ten Commandments, Moses. But I think that there are a lot of things that Abraham did that weren't necessarily sinful yet, because the faith was so primitive that they hadn't been told. They didn't know any better. It's like, here, have my maidservant, like, ooh, that's not, you shouldn't do that. Yeah, you shouldn't do that, but they didn't know not to do that. And he was, like you said, trying to help. He was trying to do a thing that he thought would be a good thing.
Yeah, Romans chapter 1 lays out the explicit, there's enough from natural law that we should know the basics of right and wrong.
Mhm.
And if we reject what we can figure out through logic and philosophy and basically the general revelation stuff, if we reject that, then we're going to go down a much worse path and get into even worse things, including disobeying your parents. I love how that's included in the evil list of horrible sins.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But
all this debauchery and sin and vulgarity and murder, and they disobeyed their parents.
I love how that's there. But yeah, so Romans 1 is this, there's enough to know the basics of right from wrong out there. And the issue, though, is not necessarily disobeying right from wrong, because then when you get to chapter 2 of Romans, it's even when you have the law, you're still a sinner. Right. So even if you know what's wrong, what's right and wrong, you're still going to mess up. And the basics of it, though, is the real crux of the issue is if you reject the creator for something created instead. And that's what Romans 1 points out, is that's the turning point when people go south, is they reject the creator for the created. And that's sort of what Abraham, what was going for him is the whole time he's, I will be faithful to the God who showed up and started talking to me. I'm going to be faithful to God. And he still does all these other things.
Right.
Which maybe he had a rule about it. Maybe he had an intuition not to do it. Maybe he didn't have an intuition not to do it. But the thing he had going for him is that he never rejected his creator.
Right. Right. Well, that is, yeah, that makes sense. But giving away Sarah, she's my sister, you can have her. And he did that a couple of times. And we read that and go, gosh, how's that? How did he not know? But I think he didn't know. I think he thought, yeah, let's just do this thing. And then they won't kill me and everything will be okie dokie.
Yeah. Abraham's never righteous by the code of conduct. He's righteous by what's credited to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's some things that I think you may not know right from wrong, but it's a clear enough thing that God it's still okay for God to punish you for it. And
well, sure. But I think that there's, there's things, what is it where he talks about those times have passed, God winked at, where it says in the scripture that God winked at these things that happened in the past. I kind of think that means that God's like, yeah, this is still a sin, but we're not there yet. It's just like, it's like children. Like there are certain things that you don't tell children not to do when they're 3 years old, because they're not ready for that yet. You don't need to tell them, don't sneak out of your room and go drinking at the bar. I mean, they're 3. They're not.
I did that when I was year-olds.
Right. I mean, there's certain things that you don't have to tell immature religious people the same things that you tell people when they're a little more mature.
Right. And that's sort of, you could extrapolate that out of Galatians, maybe, that Galatians doesn't necessarily go into that, but Galatians says the law shows up as the teacher. And so if you're a kid in the household, you follow the law, but then grown-ups are just members of the household and aren't under the law, because the pedagogue is what the law is. It's the teacher. You don't have a schoolmaster anymore when you're a grown-up. But so if you want it, maybe it's fair game to extrapolate the metaphor even further and say you don't hire a tutor for the one who can't even talk yet.
Right. So, right. That's appropriate. Yeah. And that's what I think is sort of happening in the Old Testament, at least for me, when you read some of these things and it's like, why on earth would they think that was okay? And it's like, well, because they're still a little bitty baby, theologically.
Look at that cute little idiot.
Yeah, cute little father of Israel.
So that brings us
giving
back
his wife away.
33, because the ending point of the chapter is that he builds an altar and names it El Elohe Israel, which means God, the Elohim of Israel.
Israel, yep. And
so that's the big thing about how you knew if you actually followed the Creator or not in the Old Testament, is which Elohim are you faithful to? Because everybody believed back then in lots of Elohim. And Abraham would have been surrounded by people who believed in other Elohims. And it's when Jacob decides, I'm Israel, and this God is my Elohim.
Right.
That's the defining moment for, okay, he actually has real faith now. He's decided this is the one I'm following, not those other guys.
Well, and that's significant too from the standpoint of he had always referred to Elohim or God as the God of Abraham or the God of Isaac. You know, I follow the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac. And at the end of this chapter, yes, he says
He's my God too.
This is Israel's God. Yeah, mine.
Yeah, and we often will read, oh yeah, Israel, the nation of Israel, but no, this is the nation of Israel is him right now.
Yeah, right now.
So he's saying God is the God of my household. It's for me and my house. We will wrestle the Lord.
Correct. We will wrestle. Well, and that's another good point too, is that Israel, that word means a nation, but it also means a guy. It's a guy at this point. It's just that dude.
I will point out there's some chit chat about what's that noise. So we have a Celebrate Recovery meeting going on down the hall, and they're doing worship. So
you're listening to the sound of recovery, the celebration of recovery. Is the noise.
I see the question. What would a 3-year-old be drinking at a bar? I was one time invited to a bar with my grandpa when I was like 6, 7. It was during the daytime, and it was just one of those restaurants in the day, bars at night. But when I got home after spending time with my grandpa, I was like, Mom, Grandpa took me to a bar.
Did your mom?
She was surprised at first. I don't remember how the reaction went down entirely, but I remember that she reacted strongly to me saying that my grandpa took me to a bar.
maybe say it a different way. All right. So are we done?
There's another theme of this chapter, that the faithfulness of God, because he gets the one who holds the promise, who has the blessing of Abraham passed down to him. He makes it home safe. Another note I have is Seir means hairy, just like Esau. So that. That's the only other notes I've got.
Seir means hairy. You know what's funny about that is you so many names in the Bible, are descriptive, and they mean something about the Lord, or something about strength or protection, or there was another one that meant Sukkoth. Sukkoth means
tents, booths,
tents, shelters. And so you got that. And then other words just mean like hairy, and it's interesting.
Well, so Esau was hairy. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if it's named after him, because he sort of populated that area. I don't know. That's it's hard for me to formulate how populated the earth was at this time. Because we know just a few generations ago, Abraham, a large army is 318 people.
Right.
And yet we're still having families of like 12 kids, and so they're highly populated. But that's partly because we know that everybody dies, so you need large families. But when you show up at a place and you just name it after what you see around you, or you name it after what event just happened in your life, or you name it after
a couple of people that were
or you name a place 2 camps because I made 2 camps there. Like
right. Right.
So is the world really that sparsely populated? And I guess so. Like it's weird to think about for me.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess we don't know. We don't know how many people there were. But...
So I was watching a video earlier today. I think yesterday, part 3 was released. It's about a site called Toglepi Pepi or something like that. And it's the oldest human civilization site we found. And we genuinely have no idea why people started to gather there. But up until that point, historically, humans never gathered into one spot as far as we know. And it's the first time they ever do. And it's miles away from a nearest water source. And so that's why they're just confused.
Why they gathered there.
Why did people gather in these spots? And how did naming conventions work back then? And it's just, those are the questions that I won't care about when I get into heaven, but I like to think about nowadays that when I get to heaven, I'd love to figure out, like, how did human civilization work when there basically was none?
When there was no civilization, right?
Yeah.
Before there was uh, before there was farming and irrigation, before we figured out how to manipulate the land.
Now, the book of Enoch teaches that it's fallen angels who are the ones who taught humans how to do those things. But that's the book of Enoch. So,
yeah, well, that's another talk. But there are a lot of people who would suggest that it was aliens. You know, there are people who've said that their aliens have come and seeded life onto the planet and taught ancient people how to do stuff. And that's kind of the premise of 2001. There's that.
Yeah, I read that book
obelisk.
2 weeks ago. Yeah.
And
then
it's
there's
kind of
Stargate. Stargate was a good series. Did you ever watch that series?
I didn't see the series. I saw the movie.
Well, series makes a movie and then makes a TV show about it. It was long running. It was 10 seasons.
Yeah, it was long. I didn't watch any of the television show.
Had one spin-off series that was like 7 seasons long, and then another spin-off series that was 2, and they had like 4 made or released to home movies. So
that's almost as much as Star Trek, isn't it?
Yeah, it was all the different star shows have a lot of stuff.
We have a fascination with aliens. What does that mean?
We do. Now, there's a lot of Christians too who teach that aliens are actually demons. So, I mean, if we want to bring it back around to something Christian, like, are we just filling time here talking about aliens, or?
No, I'm choking to death.
I get to say whatever I want right now without contradictions.
I got a tickle in my throat. It won't go away.
Is he okay? Okay. I'll cover and start talking about aliens, and you'll just agree
to talk about aliens and ending connection.
So at this Toglepi Pecky, whatever you say place, there's a picture. There's a carving of a man with the head of like a bull or something who's carrying a little bag. And I watched a video the other day that these little bags are found at ancient sites all over the world. And so the bag must be a symbol of leadership of the aliens because they're the ones who went to the different places. I really did watch a video like that. It was only like 2 minutes long. That's why I watched the whole thing. But
it's an interstellar briefcase that all of them carried.
It's true. I saw it on YouTube.
Well, I don't know what angels are, but I do think it's interesting that there's some sort of lore that seems to be not just in one place, but there's a lot of civilizations, that aren't even connected to each other, that sort of reference things in the sky and things flying around.
Why we've got with roughly the same structures built throughout the world at all approximately the same time period in human history, like the pyramids and then the American pyramids, and why we have those structures that are shared amongst all human groups. One theory is aliens. The other theory is that it's really easy to build things by stacking them on top of each other.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to go with that theory.
That's a little simpler theory. Occam's razor would suggest that that's probably the correct one.
Probably. Now that said, I've gone to the one. Which one is it called? The one in Mexico, the really big pyramid. There's several.
Giza? Oh no,
Giza's the Egyptian one. Yeah, it's the Mayan one, and I can't remember the name of it right now. There's lots of them throughout Mexico, but the one really big one, I can't remember the name of it right now. But it's a really cool structure, and they made it align with all sorts of different astrological signs, and like it's really neat. But then you remember how many people were slaughtered on top of it.
Mm-hmm. And it kind of takes the magic away.
Yeah, and it's not Machu Picchu. I don't remember the name of it.
That's the only one I know.
I'm gonna remember in the middle of the night and say, "Why didn't I say that?"
You can come back on. Okay, come back on and tell us what it is. Yeah, I don't I don't necessarily ascribe to the whole alien thing the way people talk about aliens, because universe is too big. I don't know how they get here, and where they go, after they.
Chichen Itza. That's it. I looked it up.
What is it?
Chichen Itza.
Chichen Itza.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, so there's the C.S. Lewis theory on life and other planets. You know that one, right? At least the one in his space trilogy.
That it's size.
No, that there's life on pretty much every other planet. It's just we don't know about it because we're the only planet that has sinned, and so we're in quarantine.
Oh, really? All the other planets are.
Yeah. So the space trilogy, C.S. Lewis's space trilogy is a really good read. It's fun. But yeah, the premise of books 1 and 2, 3 gets a little bit different. But books 1 and 2 is the reason why we don't know about life on other planets is because God doesn't want us to break the innocence of the other planets because we're the only ones who sinned.
I love C.S. Lewis.
He's a good thinker.
Yeah, he's a thinker. All right. I didn't expect we were going to talk about aliens tonight.
I mean, I can talk more about aliens, but
well, if I don't mind talking about aliens, but the whole, it's interesting to me the role that angels play and the references to angels in the scripture, and how all these people like what's his name, Stephen Hawking, and Richard Dawkins, and some of these really famous astrophysicists and scientists and biologists, and whether they're like, the Bible is such hooey, these superstitious old stories. It's like, well, how did we get here? Well, it could have been aliens. It's like, okay, so you got a big problem with angels and angelic beings.
Either you have God or something that is extremely similar to only a couple different religions' versions of God, or you have turtles all the way down.
Right.
That's the only two options.
Right.
It's either something created something going all the way back into infinity, which is literally impossible unless the rules of space-time work differently when you get further back in time.
Right.
Or you have something that's very much like the God of the Bible. It's one of those two options.
Right.
But
right. And it's not aliens. It's not aliens. Because they had to come from somewhere as well. I mean, the aliens had to. It's turtles all the way down. Right.
It's true.
Okay, we have to stop because I'm pretty sure I cracked my sternum coughing. So I'm gonna.
You getting hurt?
I'm gonna dash off to the emergency room, and thanks again, Adam, for coming in, pitching. I gave Adam almost no warning, because Gary didn't let me know until last minute, and so Adam was willing to pinch hit, and it was great. We'll definitely do it again.
It's fun. I did this for a while during 2020 by myself, and it's so much better to do it with another person on camera.
Yep. I was actually dreading the thought of trying to do this thing all by myself. I would have, but it's much better when you got somebody that can fill in for you and talk while you're choking to death.
Dying,
yeah, while you've got something in your throat and you're about to leave the earth. All right, so we will see everybody next week, same time. Maybe Gary will be back. I'm not making any promises.